All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Icons with Ava Johanna. This conversation, it's going to be so juicy. Get ready for your hearts to expand. Get ready to be tapped into your love signal, to raise your love signal, because today we have Chantal Landreville coming onto the show. I think I got it. I think I said it
You
with a
did a
little bit of
great
my French
job.
accent.
You rolled the R and everything. I love it.
One of my best friends is French, and so I always will practice with her. And so it's like one of my favorite languages. Do not speak it at all, but I try my best. And so whenever I get the opportunity, I'm going to swing the bat.
Well, we appreciate it because French is definitely such a beautiful language. The words that come out do not come out the same way in English as they do in French.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But Chantal, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And for everybody who has been a longtime listener of The Alchemized Life and now Icons, you might remember Chantal from a couple of years ago. But for those of you that are newer to this beautiful community and to this podcast, Chantal, I would love for you to just briefly introduce yourself because I know that so many of the women that listen to this podcast are very much going to resonate with your story of being independent, powerful, like just that like badass woman entrepreneur. And I just feel like today's all about letting love in, letting yourself be supported. And so I want you to share that journey for yourself.
I love that. Oh, wow. You just took me back to a couple years and like just this whole flash went by me, like going down memory lane. So I am the author of Raise Your Love Signal, a guide to attracting and keeping the love of your life, a new book that was launched last Valentine's Day. And I am a certified love and relationship coach. My journey is really a little interesting because I always worked in sales since my early 20s. I left the house very, very young. I moved away from a small town city to a bigger town city, which now I look at today, it's like it wasn't that big, but it was a big deal back then. And was always fascinated by the human brain, human behavior, always trying to understand why we are the way we are. So I was very consumed by self-development from a very young age. And when I left my relationship, my long-term relationship, I was in a long-term relationship from 19 to 27. Let me tell you, there's a lot of changes that happen in those key times of the year. I decided that I wanted to experience life, and I wrote this list of everything I wanted to experience, and that list literally took me 10 years to go through. And when I woke up, I was like, oh my God, I'm 38 years old. What the hell am I doing? It's time for me to settle down a bit. And one of the things that I realized through my journey, and I'm taking the time to say this part, not as an entrepreneur, well, yes, as an entrepreneur, but also so we'll tie in the bow at the end about independence and making room to receive love in our world is I was single for almost 18 years. There was something that I just couldn't figure out what the hell I was doing wrong. I kept attracting unemotional, available people around me. And at one point, you just start questioning yourself. What's wrong with me? What am I doing? I was hearing from my entourage, you're being too demanding, maybe, or high standards. You intimidate people. And I'm sure a lot of your audience can relate to this. So you're just like, okay, maybe I am actually the problem. So I tended to always pretend to be someone I wasn't to fit the conditioning of what everybody was telling around me. And I dove a little bit deeper into some work the year I did take my coaching certification. And I realized that one, I was over consuming so much information and including in self-development, but I wasn't applying any of it. So that really took my journey to a whole other level of really looking inwards and understanding what my patterns and behaviors were. And one of them, I quickly came to realize was the lack of vulnerability around myself. And I was very lucky to have a girlfriend that told me, she was my roommate at the time, Chantal, if you can't be vulnerable with your own friends, what the hell are you going to do the day that you get into a relationship? And when we have these aha moments, like the light just goes through and you're ready to hear the message properly. I was like, oh God, yeah, she's right. What am I going to do? And why I'm taking the time to explain this is that vulnerability for me being like leaving the house very young, having to fend for myself. I did not come from a family that had a lot that had a lot of money. It was me, myself, and I. So I was really good at taking care of everybody else, but not letting anybody take care of me. And it's a muscle I needed to develop because it was something I wasn't familiar with. And it took me years. I would say when I finally decided, I'm like, okay, how am I gonna get this to get it done? I'll call one girlfriend. And my best friend, this was my best friend. It took me almost 5 months to actually call her and say, okay, this is the day. I'm going to tell you what's happening. I don't need you to judge me. I don't need you to tell me what to do. I just need you to listen and hold space for me. And I couldn't believe how hard it was to just be in that space with someone I felt so comfortable with. And I would say that from that day on, the calls took like less and less time. And then within almost a year and a half, it was easier to do it with another friend and another friend. And then a couple of years later, it was like, how can I introduce this to my line of work where when I can't do something, I can actually ask for help or not get my ego or pride in the way and say, I can't do it. I need the help. So it took like a good 6 years. And why I'm saying this as well is that when I did find the amazing man and my fiance today in my world, I was able to receive the kind of relationship that I had been trying to call in. And he's a massive old school provider. He's a little older than I am. So he likes to just take care of his woman, and it has nothing to do with necessarily financially, but it was just, I was able to finally receive it. And so let's hop on to the entrepreneurship journey here. She's like, take it back, Chantal. As I said, I was in sales. I finally decided during COVID, because I was in the wine industry for almost 20 years, which was always very human relationship, right? So you're breaking bread, you're entertaining. And because I had great listening skills, people would literally vomit their lives to me. So because I had this passion in the back of self-development, I would actually share everything I learned. And people would say, oh my God, this actually helped me. So when COVID happened, I went from traveling the world, being on a plane every week, to all of a sudden being at home 24/7 and just like, what am I going to do with my time? And when I did meet my today fiance, I realized, you know what? It's one thing to attract the right partner, and it took me 18 years, but how are we going to sustain and maintain the relationship? And because I had learned everything I learned, I had built my toolbox to be able to apply these things in relationship, which has made a huge difference. Hence where Raise Your Love Signal was born. I put a coaching program together, and then I wrote a book. And then last year, I finally made the decision to leave the wine industry and jump like full on to this new venture because my heart was pulling me to do this full time. But you and I know, Ava, it's super easy.
It is not always easy, that is for sure. But I just love your transparency and even your vulnerability in sharing your journey. Like, even just you sharing is such a reflection of where you were versus how far you've come. And I know that we've talked about this before, but like, I so deeply resonate with that. I didn't come from money either. My walls were 1,000 feet high. And for me, it was always, how can I come off as totally okay, taken care of? I got it. I can carry the whole weight of the world on my shoulder because everyone says, wow, it's so cool that you're just so powerful and you got this. And it like was a badge of honor that for so long, I didn't realize that was actually creating so much separation between me and myself, but also me and my partner, me and the friends that I had in my life, even family members. And I just think that it's so relevant to a lot of high achievers or type A women and entrepreneurs, because a lot of us got into this work because we were scrappy, because we had so much drive and the fortitude to be able to create success and not need other people to do it for us. But that create like that, it's a double-edged sword, right? It's like
Exactly.
it's beautiful and it serves us in business, but is it serving us in intimacy? Is it serving us in romantic relationships and like even in friendships, like you were saying? And, I think the last time we spoke, I was still married. And what I realized since the last time we spoke in getting divorced and having to really reflect on what was the part that I played in that is that power that so many of us have that have created success and desire these like big visions for our businesses can actually be the detriment of letting love in. And like you said, being able to sustain it too. Like I like to think of myself as pretty magnetic, and like if I'm in a relationship now, but like if I was single and I like went on a date, I could probably start a relationship pretty quickly, but it was the sustaining it piece that was challenging. So I'd love to talk more about that because I think that that is definitely going to resonate with a lot of people.
Absolutely. I mean, the maintaining and keeping, and that's why I remember when I was trying to finalize the title, the subtitle of the book, I had a problem with keeping. I was like, I feel like it's very possessive and stuff, but at the end of the day, it's not that. It's like we do want to keep because it's so hard to actually get to that finding our right person. We want to keep and sustain our relationships. And you said a few things to kind of recap what we were talking about. And I love what you said, the syndrome of this whole like boss babe, I got this, I'm an overachiever. We get into our own way, as you mentioned, because it is not normal. And we've been conditioned to think that we have to like hustle. And, in my entrepreneurship journey, I'm a little younger in my journey than you are. You started this many years ago. I officially left the corporate world to be into this entrepreneurship journey. I've realized things like giving myself permission and patience for things to actually happen and being okay with it instead of getting into comparison mode, instead of, starting to create like the imposter syndrome because you're paying attention to what everybody else is saying instead of trusting myself enough. And this is the thing that I want to share, and that's made a huge difference in my relationship, is I trust me so much, who I am, how I show up, my language, who I address myself to. And I want to call these people in my world, not in anybody else's world that's out there, because it's just different vibration, different energy. So if you get caught up in that comparison mode, which I did for the first 2 years when I started the business, I was like, I don't understand how this is not moving fast enough. I should be doing more. I need to do this. And you get so scattered, you forget the essence of what your heart is actually telling you that you need to do, because you're listening to the should have, would have, could have's, and like, okay, everybody's telling me this, everybody's telling me that. And it's like, no, 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 no. It's like taking the time to breathe and really listen to your heart. So in relationship, what I've come to realize through building my business is learning to ask for help and learning to lean in to asking for help when I don't know what to do. And, I was telling you how the vulnerability muscle took me a long while to do. But what I've come to realize is that sometimes all of these things, all of these patterns, these behaviors that we've had for a long time that are often from childhood stay part of us. It's just that when we develop our self-awareness and we develop those new muscles, we're able to catch on quicker on how to catch ourselves through it. That inner chat, right? That happens in like 0.1 second. It's like, whoa, Chantal. No, 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 no. You're not trying to go in your corner and fix this shit all by yourself again. You got a support system. You got your man to help you. You go and ask for help. So the way the dynamic happens is it's much quicker than I used to do, but it's still easy for me to retract to old ways. And I think it's important for people to know that it's not because you're aware of something that you don't necessarily retract to old ways. It's just how quickly you can bring yourself back and be kind and gentle to yourself when that is happening as well, right? So in relationship, and I'll tell a story quickly. When I moved in with my fiance, I asked him, okay, so who's going to take care of what? Who's paying this? Who's paying that? And he's like, no, 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 I got you. Let's see, I got you. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I'll at least pay the bills, the grocery. And he took me by the shoulders with his big blue eyes. And he was like, Chantal, do not take away something from me that I can do and that I want to do.
Wow.
And I remember like ding, ding, ding. The clock was like the inner chat started. And I was like, this is what you've been working for. This is the moment. This is what you've prayed to have. It's right here, right now. You need to chill, release, and receive. And we were talking a little bit about this before going online, where when I made the decision to finally leave the wine industry to fully go 100% into this coaching business, we had to talk and see, could I be supported? And my partner was really great from the beginning. He was like, I'm happy to support you through this. And I was like, no, 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 it can't happen. It can't happen. And it took me about 6 months to be able to process the idea. And I remember locking myself up for 2 days in a cottage in the middle of nowhere and writing down what were my fears around it. Of course, financial dependence. What if I don't make it? What are people going to think? Like all the shit that can start when you're starting as an entrepreneur. And then once I wrote that down, I was like, okay, well, let's talk about who Chantal is, and let's remember everything that you can do. So I started talking again against the fear and finding the solution towards that. So when I came back, I was like, you know what? I'm doing this because if something happens to me tomorrow, I will kick myself for not taking the chance and doing it. And I can always go back to what I was doing because I was great at it. So why not? But I would say once I made that decision to learn to receive that from my partner was so uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable. I was like, and I remember the first time I had to ask for money, but he never, ever, ever made me feel ever, and he still does until today, guilty about it, or like, make me feel bad about it, or any comments or whatsoever. And I think this is a dynamic that we've created together by learning to receive and give to one another. And it's very important because learning to receive in relationship is, it has to be reciprocated for the dynamic to work. So it's like this wheel that's constantly going on and on and on.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. I mean, there's so many things that I want to say about this. One, I'm just so happy for you both because, like, for him to say, like, I want to do this, like, don't take this away from me. I think that a lot of like our societal programming as the independent boss babe woman is that if we if we aren't self-sustaining, then we are like sucking life from and taking advantage of our
Mhm.
partners. And I don't know where that came from, but it's just not simply the case for many men that do actually desire to support their partners in that way. That's not to say every partner is going to show up
Yeah.
with the same energy as your fiance, but when you do find that person that wants to support you, it's it's not they're doing it just because you asked for it or just because they feel like they have to. There's partners that actually love to be able to do that. And I think that that's just a really like, I don't know, the moment you said that, I feel like for a lot of people listening, there's probably a moment of like, wow, my mindset and my belief system just kind of like shattered a little bit. And I just let in a whole new way of looking at relationships and being supported. So thank you for sharing that. And I can totally resonate with you around like the like needing to kind of get used to the relying and receiving support from somebody else, because I for sure have had to like totally reprogram my nervous system around that with my current boyfriend. Because that's really what it is, right? It's like our nervous system is so set in one way of
Yeah,
being and receiving and assuming and just like operating through life that like we really do have to retrain ourselves to be in a different dynamic. And you mentioned that there's this reciprocity that's happening there. And I'm curious, like, what that reciprocity really looks like. Like, what is when you think about receiving and giving in relationship, where, when you're working with your clients, or like if for anybody that's listening, where, where is a good place to start? Is it like a conversation with their partner to understand like what receiving really looks like for each person and what giving looks like for each person? Because I assume that the dynamic is going to be different for every relationship.
100%. We're so different, right? So to assume that everybody thinks the same, we don't, it's like crazy. We have to understand who we are. So I always say when I'm coaching clients is that we're two people, and this is not just geared towards romantic relationship. I always say everything I teach is applicable to all relationships. It's relational to another human being. We all come with our baggage on the back, right? It's whether you've healed it, whether you've not, it's like you just have it there. And we have this expectation that other people that we barely know should know what's in our baggage right away. The only way that that happens is to create time and conversation. So I always say, create time, get curious, and create a safe space for people to be able to be vulnerable, share their story, why I'm like this, what's happening. Because a lot of people say they want things, and I ask them, it's like when I'm talking about, do you know what you're looking for in a relationship? The average person thinks they do. And when we dive deeper into it, I'm like, you actually really don't know what you want. So it's crazy. It's like we really think we know what we want, but we really don't. So if you can't define it properly yourself, how do you expect someone that doesn't come from your world, that wasn't raised the same, that doesn't think the same like you, to actually understand what it is you say? So one of the things that I teach and that I push a lot on is that if you're starting to date or you're starting a new relationships, there are some key fundamentals to make sure that you create at the beginning. And one of them is obviously communication. It's learning to say what it is that you want and need, and understand why you want and need those things. Also, like your boundaries. So that's why I always say the piece of having so much self-awareness is the key for you to succeed in a relationship, because when you're actually able to explain that to another person, the communication level goes from like 0 to 10. And I'll give a quick example. We were in Europe at the end of May on our vacation, and we were traveling with 8 other people. And as everything with 8 other people, sometimes shit can hit the fan. And I had dealt with a bad situation. So I'm sitting in the car, we're driving down to a restaurant, and I'm in my head trying to figure how am I going to handle this situation. And my partner looks at me and he's like, "Are you mad at me?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not mad at you at all. I'm just processing something in my head. Like, leave me alone." And 15 minutes later, the same thing. He's like, "Are you sure you're not mad at me?" And I looked at him and I was like, "I don't understand what's happening. I told you I wasn't mad. Why is this bothering you?" And because he has self-awareness, this is what he said. His dad was an alcoholic. So he's like, it just this breath or what's happening, this energy reminds me of when I come home. I never knew if my dad, would like be mad, beat me up, be verbally abusive and all that stuff. So he goes, everybody was mad at me in the family. So I just have this trigger coming up. So, oh, wow. Okay. I'm sorry. It was so easy for me to change my mood to create and change the dynamic. So you see the level of conversation that happens versus if he wouldn't have known that, he could have just like started biting. I bite, and then it elevates for something that's not even really meant to be happening, and it gets crazy. And this is what often happens. So the more you understand why you are the way you are, you can actually figure it out and explain it. And it has half the time when we're going through these things. It has nothing to do necessarily with the partner in front of you. It's like some old stuff that's bothering us, or we're not getting what we want the way we want. So I would say communication is so important. And that's why it's like, when we talk about being in a relationship, one of the things that I teach is like, we often make it about the partner. What do I want out of my partner? But we never think, what do I need to grow and evolve in relationship? How do I
Mhm.
want my partner to show up for me if I lose my job tomorrow? How do I want him to, if we're going to go through a financial crisis, how do I want him to show up or her to show up in this? So you're taking the conversation further where you're being more intentional other than just the now. And what that does is that you focus on what really matters, and you can take conversation from a very superficial level to a much more intentional level. Things like, I always say, if you need something and you'll love this story, actually. Sorry, me and my stories. I
I
find
love the
people,
stories.
when we first started dating, I love fresh flowers. I buy myself fresh flowers every week. I love the colors, the different types. So I always I'm the wild child of flowers. And when we were dating the first few months, I was dancing. So I was doing a dance show, and you know how it is. People come in with flowers at the end for the artists. And so as I'm coming out of the room, I see he's in the room with the bouquet of flowers, but I see that they're grocery bought flowers. They're just like bought from the side of the road kind of thing. And I just want to specify, this has nothing to do with grocery bought flowers. It was the packaging and the intention that wasn't there, just so people understand where I'm going with this. And it bothered me. I got so triggered. I was like, and my girlfriend was laughing. She was like, Chantal, at least it's the thought that counts. It's like, you should be happy. At least you brought flowers. And I was like, you know what? You're right. 2 weeks later, still bothering me. I'm like, why the hell is this bothering me so much? And then I realized, my man, the only thing he wants in his life is to make sure I'm happy all the time. So I said, if I don't take the time to tell him why flowers are important to me, every single time going forward, he'll buy me flowers, I'll experience this feeling of what I just experienced instead of appreciating the moment. So I said, you know what? Because I practice what I teach, I'm actually going to say this. So I sat him down and I said, listen, I want you to understand, I'm taking the time to explain this to you and why it's important to me. It's not because I didn't appreciate what you did. It's just that I know you want to make me happy. And I just want to make sure going forward we can do better. So I said, flowers are important to me. And I just felt like there was no intention behind it. It's just like you were running late and you grabbed the thing and that was it, right? And he was like, okay, I get that. Thanks for telling me. Now, when I talk about being reciprocal, he could have taken it personal when I got vulnerable and shared my need, because I was very clear why I needed this. That's why I'm saying how important it's, you need to know your why behind your want or your need. You need to be able to explain it. And he didn't take it personally. And this is what happens often in dynamics, right? Share, be vulnerable, but then people take it personally. He could have said, you know what? I took the time, at least, like, you should be happy. He could have attacked me and get into his ego, but that wasn't the case. And from that day on, I always get beautiful flowers. Never been grossing.
They need to exchange, my boyfriend and your fiance need to exchange phone numbers. Okay, so this is beautiful, and it sounds like your partner is conscious, aware, has done work within
Yes.
himself. But what about the people that are with partners that haven't done the work and aren't as open to feedback, and even like the conversation in the car with your fiance, it's like, what if it was with a partner that wasn't able to articulate why that like maybe anxious attachment was coming up? Because I that's what I hear with a lot of my clients, is like they're on this journey, they are becoming more um spiritual, they're doing the work, but their partner isn't doing the work. And I
Yes.
know that for myself in my marriage, one of the things that didn't sit right with me outside of the ownership that I've had to take in was that I felt like I was doing a lot of work to understand myself, going to therapy, pulling apart why I am the way I am and understanding my protector parts, but my partner wasn't as open to doing that, which led to miscommunication. It led to reactiveness. It led to fights. It led to me trying to be vulnerable, him not receiving it, and then me getting worked up and going back into those protector parts because I felt like I wasn't being heard. And so this is something that I feel like is so freaking common in the personal development space when one partner is doing it, but the other partner isn't. What are your thoughts?
Oh my God, lots to unpack here.
Yeah. Hold,
You know,
please. We have to schedule another podcast for
I
this
know.
entire conversation.
Part two.
Yeah.
I think there's different ways of looking at it, and it depends where you are in your relationship. Number one, if you're single and looking for love and starting to date, this is where I say you have to choose wisely, pay attention. That's why it's like I talk about it in my book, the eagle eye vision, see the bigger picture. You know, when I talk about how do I want to grow and evolve in relationship, one of the things on my list that was really important was to be with someone that was open to my, because I always had this spiritual woo wah wah stuff, you know, and I was like, okay, he doesn't need to be in it, but as long as he respects me and lets me be in it, and he's very curious about it. So that's just an example. If you're single on the hunt, like pay attention to these things. You have to remember what really matters and how you want to grow and evolve in relationship. Now, if you're already in relationship and you have that dynamic where you've been together for a while and all of a sudden you choose to do this, what happens when we start, we have the expectation that our partner should do the same thing. And they always say that it only takes one in relationship to elevate the relationship together. Now, granted, there also needs to be two people that are open to doing the work. So I always say, you know, two things that are important in relationship is one, having the willingness together to always grow, learn, evolve. Willingness is like, okay, I want to work on this. I want to actually try to understand. I want to try to support you. There's a willingness. So if there's a lack of willingness between partners, you're kind of screwed. But to go back is like, you also need to give time to the other person to come. And this is what happened with me and my partner at the beginning, because there were certain things that we weren't aligned on. And when we talked about it, he was like, you need to give me time. You need to give me time. And I was like, okay, I know I'm here for the right reasons. And you know what? You're right. I don't need this to be solved in the next 3 months or 5 months, as long as you are committed to doing the work and investing the time into what we're talking about, which has happened. And it took, I would say, 18 months for this issue to kind of like issue. So be careful with how you force down your stuff into your partner's belief. And men and women are so different with how we choose to learn. Men are a little bit more, you know, rugged, and they don't speak the same language. They don't naturally go to self-development like we do. So as a woman, though, we have a lot of power to be able to introduce them to things if we know how to do it in a delicate way, or just like sometimes, you know, I'll always send my man like little reels or memes that have a message, and it sinks in. He takes a couple weeks or even months sometimes. This weekend I was away. Random. By the way, I was thinking you sent me this. I was listening to the podcast you sent to me and I realized X, Y, Z. And I was like, okay, so there needs to be a surrendering process to not having the expectation for your partner to deliver as much as you are or as invested. Like so we often have that expectation because I'm doing it, he needs to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Then the third part is if you're with a partner that just like really wants to have nothing to do and is not invested and doesn't want to do any work, that gets really hard and tricky. And one of the things that I say, if you're starting a new relationship, most people tend to wait till shit hits the fan to go get help, the support. And that's why I teach, learn, I call it relationship maintenance. Work with people while your relationship is great, so you can learn these tools and the language. And when, you know, shit does get down, instead of doing this, it's just gonna do stuff like that. So it's a really new reprogramming of how we perceive relationships and being in relationships, where we always wait till, like in your case, the it just went down. And I'm
Mhm.
not saying that you didn't have the tools, because you were already doing a lot of like great self-awareness stuff, but because we wait till it's too late, and then there's resentment that's built up, there's anger, there's frustration, and depending on who you're dealing with as well, they just can't move over, then there's not much to be done. But I would ask your partner, sit down, have a conversation. This is what's happening. And always speak from the I feel, not you don't do this, you don't do that, because there's nobody that responds well to being accused of stuff. Be very careful of the language you use, and say, our relationship is important, and I would really love for this to thrive, but we're going through a rough patch. What do you feel we could do together? And what's the agreement? And I always say, start with small things, like it could be, okay, I don't know, I'm just saying anything, like every night before we go to bed, we'll share, like, how do you feel I showed up for you today? Or do you feel, I dismissed when you communicated to me XYZ? It's called, what I call it, connection time, where it doesn't need to be a date or this thing. It's just checking in to making sure we're being heard. We feel acknowledged, right? Because we often dismiss, and that's where the frustration is. We want to feel acknowledged, especially when you're sharing what you need, want, and desire. And then you focus on the solution. Well, I'm thinking maybe we could do this, or what do you think about that? Or I'm sorry, I didn't do this. What can I do going forward? And oftentimes it's on the smallest things, right?
I love all of this. When you are having conversations and communicating with your partner, sometimes, even if we do have all of the tools, it can feel like you start to feel your heart beating a little bit. You might start to feel your defense mechanisms start to come up. What do you do in that situation? Like, for somebody who's like, okay, I'm going to start implementing this. Like, I want to have a conversation with my partner and start, like, at the end of every night having these like this communication space for ourselves. But I'm a little scared that, like, what if it escalates? What if I start to like get into my reactive state, or what if they do? How do I hold the energy down so that it is productive and it doesn't like end up being like a 3-hour discussion that keeps us up until like 12 o'clock or 1 a.m. and turns into something so much bigger than it needs to be? Like, what are your little tools and tricks for staying grounded in the moment in conversation?
What a great question. I love that. And it still happens to me all the time, but it's the inner chat thing that I've developed so I always say in a relationship, it's a threesome. It's you, your partner, and the actual relationship. So you always have to ask yourself this question: what am I going to say? How is my reaction? How is my like wanting to hit back to the person going to service the relationship? And
Mm-hmm.
I would say 98% of the time, it's a no. My reaction, what I'm going to say, how I'm going to attack back is not going to service the relationship, because a relationship is two. It's not you, it's not him or her, it's us. It's you both together. So I always ask myself, because it still get triggered. It's just still shit that comes up. It doesn't mean that, but my reaction space is like, so I call it the out of body experience. You talk about little tips. Take a deep breath and walk away from the situation. If you're not, I'm the kind of person that gets heated up really, really quickly. Can you tell?
We
Yeah.
got passion.
So I'm like, if we're having an argument or going through, I said, I need my space, and I leave away. And because we've had these talks where this is what I need, he understands. He won't say, no, I want to talk about this now. He knows to leave me my space, and I go calm down. I go chill out, process my thoughts, so I'm not emotional when I come back. You always want to try and stay out of emotional capacity when you're having a conversation. So number one, learn to ask yourself the question: is what I'm saying, how I'm reacting, going to service the relationship? If it's a yes, okay. If it's a no, take a deep breath, do the out of body experience, say, let me go process my thoughts. And listen, I have some people that they need to write everything down, because when it comes to expressing themselves, they're just like, they get lost, they get nervous. Do whatever works for you. If taking notes down and you have your piece of paper in front of you, I was working at one point, with an engineer, they're so thorough. And I was like, do it. What's wrong with that? Whatever works for you to express yourself, go through your notes, because if you feel you're like, okay, I want to talk about this, I want to talk about that, it's fine. And then there's a great communications masterclass that I offer that are little tips, like I said at the beginning, where if you are able to mutually have the conversation of honoring each other's, reciprocating each other's share and emotions without judging, without trying to fix, without trying to get mad, it's super important. So one, listen actively instead of passively. Are you listening to already try to respond and say, but you didn't do this, but you didn't do that? No. Okay, my person is sharing something in front of me. I need to absorb it, take it in, not take it personally. He's sharing, she's sharing. I'm just taking it in. Number two, as I said earlier, acknowledge. I get it. Okay, it's not easy to swallow. I'm like, not sure. I'm like, really, I wanted to say it in French, en accord, agreeing with you on this, but okay. And then it's like trying to focus on, I don't want to say necessarily the solution, but it's like nothing will get resolved focusing on the problem, basically. So it's like, what can we do about it? Something sometimes like just apologizing can make such a world of difference. I remember that happened once, and that's what I saw. I saw the power of acknowledging and apologizing really quickly. Two examples. Just think about when you're at an event and you meet people. We get introduced to people all the time, and I would say 99% of the people don't remember people's names, right? I try to do to make an effort all the time, but we're already moving on to something else. We're not listening actively. But I do remember when people actually remember my name and call me by my name in conversation. I don't know about you, Ava, but I'm like, shit, I'm important. That just made me feel really good. This is from a stranger. This is just from a stranger. So imagine when it comes from your friend, your best friend, your lover, your fiance, whatever, on being acknowledged, it just makes you feel, oh, okay, I can relax now. So example, Jeff and I we very rarely argue. We're in a heated argument, and he, for the first time ever, screams at me and tells me and calls me selfish. I'm just like, what is happening? Inner chat. Who the hell is this guy? What am I doing with this guy? Oh my God, I did not pick well. He's crazy. What is he doing? I'm going to friggin' come out and attack him. Who does he think he is, right? The Leo is like ready to go and attack back. And then ding, ding. Okay, he's hurt. Something's going on. He needs to be heard. He needs to be acknowledged. Take a deep breath, out of body experience, come back. And I said this, instead of attacking, I said, I'm really sorry you feel this way. I had no idea. No idea. So right away, he's like thinking I would be in attack mode. And then he's like, oh, she's actually, kind of like acknowledging my pain. And I said, what can I do going forward to make sure that this is not going to happen again? Let's figure it out. And until this day, he always says, like, I've never seen anybody take a bomb, take the pin out. You went like, instead of it exploding, and it was nothing. It was nothing. I took my ego out of the way, and I just acknowledged and I apologized. And it just made everything happier. So, these are little tricks that you can apply. And I always say, you make sure that you're not in the height of the moment. If there's something, make sure that you're calm, go for a walk, and laugh. This for me is probably the most important out of everything else. Learn to not take it too seriously and laugh about it.
Yes, Absolutely. These are all so great. And I especially like love that you brought the taking the ego out of it, because I think that sometimes that's the hardest thing for people to do is, you know, let their defenses down and be okay with being wrong, or be okay with, taking accountability and taking ownership and apologizing. I know that for me, that was like for so long the hardest thing to do, and something
Uh-huh.
that I really had to practice. So I appreciate you sharing all of these little tips. I want to talk about your book before we wrap up, because not only is Raise Your Love Signal the best title ever, but it's such a massive accomplishment to put a book out into the world. And I know it takes so much work. So, who is the book for, and what can they expect from reading it?
So it's a guide, and I specify a guide because sometimes when we're reading our book, we get overwhelmed with it being a massive brick, and we just put it aside because it's too much information. So I wanted it to be something that you can refer and reread on a regular basis, no matter where you are in your love journey. So if I have the best way to describe it, honestly, because I overconsume personal development for 20 years, it's literally the best of everything I've learned and the hundreds of thousands of dollars it cost me all stepped up into one. So it's divided in three parts. And as it says, a guide to attracting. So if you're looking for love, I share a lot of my vision of how we need to change our relationship and what we've been taught around love, because we're in love with the idea of being in love. And that's not enough to sustain a long-term relationship. There needs to be a lot more than that. We've been so rom-com and Disneyfied about love. So it's how do we change that conditioning, including having that vision of the relationship, not just the partner. So you really learn to identify what really matters, especially if you're dating. The more you do that exercise, you'll filter out the weeds so much quicker and be able to date on a higher quality level. And it talks a lot about the fundamentals of being in a relationship, which is one of the last parts in the book. It's like, okay, I found this person. What do I do now? And these are things that are massively important to start practicing from the beginning. The better you can show up and install all these good intentional habits, healthy habits, I should say, the more it'll help you long term. Most people wait, as I said, till shit hits the fan, or because we tend to pretend to be people we're not, or there's behaviors we don't like, but because we're so excited, we shove shit under the rug and pretend, and I'll change him, or it'll change with time. We convince ourselves, and all of a sudden it's like, no, this person really is like that. And then we get mad. We want our partners to become people they're not. We're trying to change them. So very important to set this from the beginning, because you know what you're in for. You want to be accepted for who you are. You need to reciprocate that as well.
So good. I feel like this is the guidance and the framework so many of us need, because like you said, like the Disneyfied, I love that. That was like, that's good. Disneyfied rom-com idea of love and relationships screws with a lot of us. Like,
Oh my God.
we're all so jaded in like what love is and what it requires, or just this idea that it doesn't really require anything. But in my opinion, it's one of the hardest things that we do, but it's also the thing that is most worthwhile, because without love, without that connection, what is life? This is what we're here for. So I'm just so grateful that you offer this work and this wisdom to the world, and that you took the leap and went full time into it, because one, congratulations on that. But two, the world needs more of this. So thank you so much for just sharing your heart, your passion, your fire. I love that Leo energy. So for everybody that is listening, please, please, please tell us where we can find you. We're going to link everything in the show notes. But yeah, how can we follow up and just get more of you?
I will share that. And I just want to say, so for people that are either single or in a relationship, I never thought I'd experience what a real open heart actually means. love when you feel safe, secure, because love for me was butterflies in my stomach, lust, passion, and all the shit, as we said, that was rom-com and Disneyfied to us. And it's an incredible and very powerful place to be in. It's a very different dimension. So I just want to invite people to think about that. So my website, raiseyourlovesignal.com, is where you can find the link to purchase my book, my programs. If you want to do some Let's Wine About Love events, I do those corporately. I can be found. The platform that I'm most active right now is on Instagram. So it's my name at Chantal.Landreville. You can probably find me on TikTok. I'm trying YouTube right now, but Instagram is definitely my biggest world right now.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been so much fun, just so eye-opening as well for tools that we can incorporate to strengthen our relationships or create a relationship that blows our freaking mind. So I appreciate you so much. Thank you everybody for being here live, for engaging in the chat, and we will see y'all next week.
Thanks so much, Ava.